Here's something most people never consider. The meal you had last night may have already started damaging your brain. Not over decades, not in some abstract future. Last night, a 2022 study published in Nature Aging tracked over 180,000 adults for nearly a decade. Researchers found that specific evening eating patterns, things most Americans do every single night, were directly associated with accelerated cognitive decline. Not linked, not correlated loosely, directly associated. In the next 18 minutes, three things. First, the exact mechanism, how what you eat at dinner crosses into your brain by morning and begins doing damage. Second, the two habits that are worse than any of the other five combined, and most people do both every single night. And third, the one dinner swap that a 2023 trial showed improved memory scores in adults over 60 within just 6 weeks. The third one will genuinely surprise you. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll never look at your dinner plate the same way. I want to acknowledge something first. If you're watching this, there's a good chance someone you love, or maybe you yourself, has had a moment recently. A word that disappeared mid-sentence. A name you've known for 30 years that suddenly wasn't there. A room you walked into and stood in, completely blank. Those moments are terrifying. And your doctors may have said, that's just aging. It is not just aging. Not always. And the research is getting clearer every year that the brain, even a brain in its 60s and 70s, is extraordinarily responsive to what you feed it. Especially at night, when your digestive and neurological systems are doing their most critical repair work. Before we get into the habits, one thing. This is general information, not medical advice. Please talk with your doctor before making any changes, especially if you're managing an existing condition. What I'm sharing here is based on published research, but your specific situation matters, and your physician needs to be part of that conversation. Now, let's start with what most people don't know about the dinner-brain connection. The mechanism, what dinner actually does to your brain overnight. Most people think of digestion as something that happens in the stomach and ends somewhere around bedtime. The food goes in, the body handles it. Done. That's not what happens. Your gut and your brain are in constant communication through something called the gut-brain axis, a two-way highway of nerve signals, hormones, and inflammatory molecules. What you eat at 7 p.m. is still actively influencing your brain chemistry at 2 a.m. while you sleep, while your brain is supposed to be cleaning itself. Here's the part that matters. Your brain has its own waste clearance system. It's called the glymphatic system, and it only runs at full capacity during deep sleep. It flushes out the metabolic debris that accumulates during the day, including amyloid beta proteins, which are directly associated with Alzheimer's disease. A 2021 study from the University of Rochester found that high-fat, high-sugar meals in the evening significantly impaired glymphatic function. The system still ran, but at reduced efficiency. Debris wasn't fully cleared. Night after night, that accumulation compounds. Think of it like a filter that's never quite cleaned all the way. Works fine for a while, then it doesn't. Now, here's what makes this more urgent. A 67-year-old woman named Margaret, a retired school principal from Raleigh, North Carolina, came into our clinic 2 years ago. Her cognitive screening showed early concern, nothing definitive, but enough that her neurologist flagged it. We looked at her labs, her sleep, her medications. Everything looked reasonable. Then we looked at her evening routine. Every night, dinner around 8:30 p.m., a large portion, usually pasta or a casserole, a small glass of wine, then TV until midnight. She'd been doing this for years. We made 3 changes, nothing dramatic. 6 months later, her follow-up screening showed measurable improvement in processing speed and short-term recall. I'm not telling you Margaret was cured of anything. I'm telling you that the brain responds, faster than most people expect. The first dangerous habit, and this sets the stage for everything else, is eating dinner too late. Not just slightly late, too late. Your circadian system, the internal clock that governs nearly every biological process in your body, has a hard preference for caloric intake earlier in the day. After about 7 p.m., insulin sensitivity drops. Your body's ability to process glucose efficiently declines. Inflammatory markers rise, and your brain, which depends on stable blood glucose overnight, gets erratic signals instead. A landmark 2023 study in cell metabolism, 51 participants, rigorous controls, found that simply shifting the same meals 2 hours earlier reduced multiple markers of metabolic inflammation within 2 weeks. Same food, earlier timing, meaningful difference. The rehook here is this. Late eating creates the conditions. The next 6 habits are what fills them. And 2 of those habits are doing damage that most people would never connect to brain health. I'll show you which 2 in a moment. the compounding habits, and the two worst offenders. Let's build on what you just learned. You now understand that your brain is most vulnerable during the overnight window, when the glymphatic system runs, when repair happens, when what you ate at dinner is still moving through your system. Given that window, here's what makes each of the following habits dangerous. They don't just harm in isolation, they compound. Each one that's present makes the others worse. Habit 2. Ultra-processed foods at dinner. This one is no longer controversial in the research. A 2022 study in JAMA Neurology, over 10,000 participants, 10-year follow-up, found that every 10% increase in ultra-processed food consumption was associated with a 25% faster rate of cognitive decline. Ultra-processed doesn't just mean junk food. It means packaged soups, flavored crackers, most frozen dinners, processed deli meats, anything with a 5-line ingredient list that includes words you couldn't find in your grandmother's kitchen. These foods trigger what researchers call a neuroinflammatory cascade. Basically, your immune system firing inside your brain, chronically. Every night, if every dinner comes from a box. Habit 3. High sodium meals. Most people connect sodium to blood pressure. That's accurate, but the brain connection is more direct than most people realize. High sodium intake, particularly at dinner, causes vascular stiffening in the small blood vessels that supply the brain. A 2021 paper in Cardiovascular Research found that this stiffening was detectable after just 8 weeks of high sodium diet, and that it reduced cerebral blood flow, the volume of blood reaching brain tissue, by a measurable percentage. Less blood flow, less oxygen, less glucose, slower processing. Over years, that matters enormously. The average American consumes about 3,400 milligrams of sodium daily. The recommended ceiling is 2,300 milligrams. Most of that excess comes not from the salt shaker, but from processed and restaurant food, much of it at dinner. Habit 4. Skipping vegetables entirely. This one seems obvious, but the mechanism isn't. The reason vegetables at dinner matter specifically is not just vitamins, it's fiber. Your gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in your digestive tract, ferments dietary fiber overnight and produces compounds called short-chain fatty acids. These molecules cross the blood-brain barrier and directly influence neurological function. They reduce neuroinflammation. They support myelin, the insulation around nerve fibers. A study from Rush University Medical Center tracking older adults over 5 years found that people who consumed the highest amounts of leafy greens showed cognitive function equivalent to being 11 years younger than those who consumed the least. 11 years. Not 2, not 5, 11. Now, if you're still watching at this point, you're exactly who I made this video for. Because what I'm about to cover in point 3 is the 2 habits that override almost everything else, and the dietary change that, in a controlled 2023 trial, produced cognitive improvement in just 6 weeks. If you've done everything else right but you're still doing these 2 things, the other changes won't hold. Let me show you why. The 2 worst habits and the 6-week solution. I want to frame what you're about to hear carefully, because I don't want to overstate it, but I also don't want to understate it, because the research is genuinely striking. Habit 5. Alcohol with dinner. Even moderate, even 1 glass. I know this is not what people want to hear. For years, decades, moderate alcohol consumption was associated with cardiovascular benefit. That research is now being substantially revised. A 2022 meta-analysis in The Lancet, combining data from over 36 studies, found no safe threshold for alcohol consumption when cognitive outcomes were the endpoint. None. Alcohol is a neurotoxin. That is not a fringe position. That's biochemistry. At low doses, the effects are subtle and largely reversible. But at dinner, specifically, the problem compounds with everything we've already discussed. Alcohol disrupts deep sleep architecture. Not total sleep time, deep sleep specifically. And deep sleep, as you now know, is when your glymphatic system does its most critical clearing work. 1 glass of wine with dinner measurably reduces slow-wave sleep by roughly 20% in older adults. A 2021 study in alcohol found this effect was significantly more pronounced in adults over 60 than in younger cohorts. The aging brain is more sensitive to this disruption. 20% less cleaning every night. Let me tell you about Robert, 71, from Scottsdale, Arizona. Former engineer, sharp mind, proud of it. He came in after his wife urged him to. She'd noticed him repeating himself. He was embarrassed. His evening routine, a beer before dinner, a glass of wine with dinner, television, bed around 11. His sleep study showed almost no slow-wave sleep. his cognitive screening showed early executive function impairment, specifically with task switching and short-term retention. He cut the alcohol. Just that, keep everything else the same. 8 weeks later, his sleep study showed slow-wave sleep had returned. 12 weeks after that, his cognitive rescreening showed measurable improvement in both flagged areas. His wife called to let us know he'd stopped repeating himself. Robert would tell you it was the hardest habit to break, not because of physical dependence, but because it was social, ritualized, felt like reward, and I understand that. But the brain doesn't negotiate with ritual. Habit 6. Large portion size late at night. When you eat a large meal, particularly high in carbohydrates and fat, late in the evening, your body produces a surge of insulin. In younger adults, that surge is handled efficiently. In adults over 60, insulin resistance is more common, and the brain is the primary victim of insulin dysregulation. Your brain needs insulin to function properly. It has its own insulin receptors. When peripheral insulin resistance develops, brain insulin signaling degrades too, and poor brain insulin signaling is now considered a significant driver of Alzheimer's pathology. A 2023 study from the Karolinska Institute found that older adults who consumed their largest meal in the evening showed higher cerebrospinal fluid markers of neurodegeneration than those who ate their largest meal midday, even when total caloric intake was identical. Same calories, different timing, different brain chemistry. And now, the 6-week solution. Here's the positive finding I promised you. A randomized controlled trial published in Nutrients in 2023 assigned adults over 60 to what researchers called a neuroprotective dinner pattern for 6 weeks. The pattern had 4 components: dinner before 7 p.m., centered on leafy greens and fatty fish, minimal processed food, no alcohol. After 6 weeks, participants showed statistically significant improvement on the MoCA, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, which is the standard screening tool used in neurology offices. Processing speed improved, verbal memory improved. The researchers noted the speed of change surprised them. Your brain is not static, even now, even at 65 or 70 or 75. It is responding to what you feed it every single night. Habit 7. Eating while distracted. This one seems minor. It isn't. Eating while watching television. The default dinner experience in American households is associated with what researchers call mindless overconsumption. You eat faster, chew less thoroughly, consume significantly more calories than intended, and critically, your parasympathetic nervous system never fully engages. The parasympathetic system is your rest and digest system. When it's suppressed during eating, because you're visually stimulated and cognitively engaged with a screen, digestion is compromised. The gut-brain signaling we discussed earlier? Weakened. Satiety hormones are delayed. Gut motility changes. A 2020 paper in Appetite found that habitual distracted eating was significantly associated with poorer diet quality overall, not just at the meal where distraction occurred, but across the full day. Distraction at dinner resets expectations downward. It also compounds every other habit on this list. You drink more alcohol when distracted. You eat later. You eat more. You don't notice portion size. The dinner table, no screens, no phone face up, is a simple intervention that touches 6 of the 7 habits we've covered. Here's exactly what I want you to do this week. Not all 7 changes. 3. First, move dinner 30 minutes earlier than you normally eat it. Just 30 minutes. Do that for a week. Your body will adjust. That one shift begins resetting your circadian signaling before you change anything else. Second, at your next grocery trip, put 1 leafy green on the list: spinach, arugula, kale, romaine, and make it a non-negotiable part of dinner 3 nights this week. Not a side thought, a centerpiece. That fiber hits your gut microbiome overnight, starting the neurological repair process we discussed. Third, on 2 nights this week, eat dinner with the television off. Just 2 nights. Sit at a table if you can. Eat slowly enough that you can have a conversation, even with yourself. Notice how much less you eat. Notice how you feel afterward. Those 3 changes touch the majority of what we covered today. They're not overwhelming, they're not expensive, and they're backed by the same body of research I've been referencing throughout. Talk to your doctor, particularly about the alcohol question if that's relevant to you. There may be individual factors your physician needs to weigh in on, but the timing, the vegetables, the distraction piece, start there, this week. Your brain has been working for you for 60, 70 years. It has never once taken a night off. It has been filtering, storing, connecting, protecting every single night while you slept. The least we can do is give it a dinner that helps it do that job. If this was useful to you, next week I'm going to walk through the specific foods that have been shown in clinical research to actively rebuild brain tissue. Not just protect it, but rebuild it. The list will genuinely surprise you. There are things on it that are sitting in your kitchen right now. Take care of yourself. Your brain is worth the effort. I'll see you next week.